Graphics cards versus CS2! The first time somebody made a real benchmark, bro, because nobody has access. Here we go, bro. Linus, I'm waiting for your video, but I don't think he has access, bro. Here we go. All the people that are wondering, is my GTX 50 gonna run CS2? Here you go.
I tried testing all of these graphics cards, and spoiler alert, the GeForce 4090 was the fastest. There's no point in me stringing you on for another 10 minutes if this is all you wanted to see. But if you haven't finished your sandwich, or whatever it is you kids eat these days, and want to watch a bit more video, then the rest of this video should have you covered. I'll start with these 4 cards, because they're all $200 graphics cards from different eras in history. We have the classic GeForce 1060 versus Radeon 480 battle going on back in 2016. Then the painfully cut down Radeon 5500 XT, which nobody liked. And then the
oh jeepers. Average FPS 300, 300, 800 CS2, 140, 150, 550. Okay.
even more cut down mobile based 6500 XT chip that nobody liked even more. I spent £200 on this one. So this is the sort of tier of graphics card I would traditionally recommend for a game like Counter-Strike, because it doesn't break the bank, yet it delivers hundreds of frames a second. So pay attention to how the 6500 XT compares against the 5500 XT, because it's not the generational improvement that you might expect it to be. Well, actually now you might, because all graphics cards are disappointing these days. But of particular interest to me is the Radeon 480 versus the GeForce 1060. Now the 480 was a bit slow and required an overclocked refresh in the form of the 580 to truly compete against the 1060. But what I have here is a custom designed 480, with so many fans that it's longer than even the GeForce 4090 is. It means I can't use it in anything but my main PC, simply because it won't fit. And it's up against the 1060 that I ripped straight out from my trusty Dell pre-build. We'll start by maxing CSGO out at 1080p with 8x MSAA, so just know that you can claw some performance back by turning the anti-aliasing or ambient occlusion down, and yes, maybe even the anisotropic filtering. But maxed out, the GeForce 1060 destroyed the Radeon 480. Like, more than I would have expected it to. Perhaps more importantly, their 1% lows were exactly the same, and better than the newer cards were, which is embarrassing. But the 480 just doesn't ever seem to get as fast. And in Counter-Strike 2, it's an even sadder story, with the 480 not even managing 144Hz. But none of them were looking too great here. They all dropped to about half the speed in Counter-Strike 2 that they were getting in CSGO. Though the
Shroud was right. Volumetric smokes. RIP FPS.
The minimums haven't dropped by quite as much. But that's fine, because I also tested 720p lowest settings, which is how people seem to play anyway. And here the results are all over the shop. I don't know what these cards are doing, if I'm honest. We're now talking about 800 FPS in CSGO, dropping to maybe 500-ish in CS2. The 6500 XT looks good here, which might be the first time anyone's ever said that about the card. And I hate to shoot it down while it's doing well, but the reason the 6500 XT is hated so much is because it's a very uneven performer, with lots of exotic limitations. They've pretty much got half a graphics card and then have clocked it super high, which has apparently helped it in Counter-Strike 2. But if you run into...
Can CSGO, for example, see how much percentage of the user base is using a GT 160, 1060 and stuff? Do they have that info? Surely, right? Because then, of course, they made sure that most of the people will be fine with the transition. Yes, they do. They do surveys. Okay, good. Chat, what are you using? Now I'm wondering, how many 4090 users do we have in the chat? Probably most of you guys know. 4090 nowadays, everybody has it, pretty much. 3070. Wow, that's old. 2060 Super. Lol. Are you even able to run the calculator? Oh, jeepers. Okay.
One of the limitations with this card, then your performance will plummet. And using an older system, I was getting about 40 FPS on Danger Zone maps, and even down some of the sightlines on Ancient, which has made me lose a bit of trust with the 6500 XT in Counter-Strike. But it's too early to tell if the same issues persist with these maps in Counter-Strike 2, and whether it happens on PCI 3, 4, or both standards. And the 480 claws back some ground versus the 1060. It's still slower on average, but now has higher minimums. There's a reason I've fixated on these cards, and it's because they're the oldest generations and slowest tiers that I deem to be still relevant. If you have something older or slower than these, and it's slowing you down, then I'm not going to take you seriously when you start complaining about it. These cards were cheap when they came out, and sure, there have been some rough times in the meantime, but prices are coming down again, and you can find cards of this caliber for £100 to £150. and probably less if you shop around. I'm saying this because while I do have some sympathy for people whose PCs worked with CSGO when it first came out, but who are now struggling because of all the updates it's received, you have to accept that it's not the same game as it was 10 years ago. It's time to upgrade. Which moves me on to the next category. Really old cards. Ooh. One of these is a Radeon 380, which is very similar to these even older
Oh my god,
cards.
that's the one that I used to use, I think. Radeon 380, I swear to god. Chat, what I was using for the longest time in high school, my mom and I bought a $400 pre-built from Aldi. Aldi or Lidl, I can't remember. Medion. You already know. It did great. It did great, bro. It served me well for like 3-4 years, 5 years maybe, 6 years.
And the other is the GeForce 680, which I swear died from the moisture levels in my old house, but it has come back from the dead to battle against its sworn Radeon rival from the time. What an exciting showdown. And don't ask me how, but both these cards have 4GB, even though I'm sure they only had 2 at the time. Yeah, it's weird, right? And this was very interesting. In CSGO, at high settings, both these cards were managing over 144 FPS average, maxed out with 8x MSAA. These are cards older than CSGO itself,
That's
sort of.
crazy.
And they're still pumping out seriously impressive and smooth feeling frame rates in a game at the end of its...
you have to remember, that's a game, that's a AAA game right now, right? CSGO, one of the highest player bases, one of the most popping games, has been for years and years. If you compare that to games that come out nowadays, fucking Warzone, what are you gonna have here, bro? Probably your fucking PC is gonna turn fire when you're running it with the fucking GeForce 680, bruh.
its lifetime. What a great investment.
Probably gonna have like 5 FPS.
But Counter-Strike 2 proves punishing, especially on the 380.
It's still alright.
I took a few minutes to mess with FSR on the Radeon 380, because that's exactly what a feature like FSR is for. It's here to squeeze just that little bit more performance out of a card that's right on the cusp between playable and unplayable. I didn't do a proper benchmark or anything, but I can confirm that FSR sped it up more than whatever overhead such a feature comes with slows it down. So this is great news for users of older cards. If we drop to low settings, it changes the situation quite a bit. Now the 380 pulls well ahead of the 680, which suffers from terrible 1% lows. Some of these 1% lows are even worse than they were at high settings. But look at the numbers here. We're still looking beyond 200 FPS average and 1% lows of 100. I'm not going to recommend you go out and buy these cards because they're ancient, but they can...
That's just insane. That is just insane, no? 720p, that's not that bad. That's not that bad. Most people play on 4x3 anyways, right, on lower resolution. 312 FPS? And this right here, a 1% low FPS, 98, that's okay. Buddha.
Still get hundreds of FPS in Counter-Strike. These were, unfortunately, the oldest cards that I tested. This wasn't as low as I wanted to go, though. I really wanted to test 2GB cards like the GeForce 760 or Radeon 250 or the ancient Radeon 6870. But they sadly succumbed to the moisture in my old house. Or maybe from being a makeshift doorstop for a while, who knows. The
a doorstop? He has to be trolling. That's so 3 clicks. Oh my god.
Nvidia has launched the GTX 1000 series, and AMD has responded with Polaris, but it isn't fast enough.
I used to have an RX 480 for the longest time. I love you, RX 480. I love you.
Hero. And that hero was Vega. Who can forget that bizarre trailer involving a small boy getting excited about discovering lots of drums? The problem was, the card was launched and it was kind of like the GTX 1000 series, but a year later. But the price was right, which is something graphics cards don't get right these days. So I have a soft spot for Vega, and it surprises me by being actually rather good in modern games. I forget to look for it sometimes, but look, here it is, still being fairly decent and all that, and widely available on eBay for just over £100, which puts the value proposition of the others I've tested into question. But be warned, it consumes power.
Bro, I'm scared to buy graphics cards used. Especially after the crypto mining wave, you know what I mean? Now trying to buy like a 4090, 3080, 3090 or whatever online used, most of them have been like, they went through like a Bitcoin mining farm or something and are completely fried. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I've read on the internet.
Maybe don't get the default lower version. I love this power meter showing how much power it's consuming. Sadly, it's also representing how much coil wind there is.
That's sick.
As you can see from this.
Lol, I have this still! Bro! My old PC
But how
did exactly that. Super loud. Every time I was moving my mouse, it did like zzz, zzz, lol. It's just coil winding, so it's a common problem. Bro, I had that for the longest time. I was streaming from the setup like this for fucking years.
this card perform in game? Well, it's second best to the 4090, sometimes getting close to it, like at low settings where it's more of a CPU bottleneck, while other times it slips back to performing more like the $200 cards that I was talking about from earlier. But on steroids.
Look at the 4090.
It might not always be really fast, but its 1% lows were good. Maybe it's the HBM2 memory, maybe it's my sloppy testing technique. But Vega shone brightly, especially in CSGO, but still had just enough in the tank for what CS2 needs to max it out at 1080p. When you're talking 170 FPS average, but still 141 FPS 1% lows, I'd deem Vega a card capable of 144Hz high settings in this game, provided you're running about an empty map. And I suppose this is a good time to reach a conclusion of sorts. And my conclusion is this. Counter-Strike 2 runs considerably slower on graphics cards than CSGO does, especially at high settings. And this will drop 300 FPS cards down to 150 FPS straight away. It's only a problem if you max out the settings though. Go easy on the anti-aliasing, disable the ambient occlusion, the anisotropic filtering, and you'll claw a lot of performance back. Just see these things as being bonuses of the Counter-Strike 2 engine. You don't have to have them. And who's playing the game like this anyway? Set the game down to low settings, 720p, and this is how it performs. I can even show the 4090 here, and it doesn't embarrass the rest of them too much. And this is when I have to ask, do you need more performance than this? Yes, it's nice.
Yes. Every CSGO player, bro. Even though you don't really use it anyways or feel it. I mean, yeah, true.
To have, but do you need more? In fact, do you need more than this, or this, or this? You might want more than this though.
Yep.
I understand you there. You'll always want a buffer, because frame rates can drop in games. Action will ramp up, there's netcode to decode, characters running about, and grenades being thrown overhead. And these are all overheads that can't be tested for the way I've done in my benchmarks. I run about an empty map in a pre-planned route for 60 seconds. The way I do it is consistent.
But he has to test for the Shroud thesis. 3 clicks, you have to throw a volumetric smoke. Because that could cause RIP FPS.
It's great for comparing one graphics card against another, and I'm so familiar with the route, I know if something's off with it. But playing online, while it would open the gateway to 1,000 new variables, I understand why you might want me to test like that, because it would be more representative of real world performance. It's just I didn't test like that, and couldn't. But what I have determined is that, simply by playing in an empty map, there is a substantial frame rate drop by moving from CSGO to CS2. At least when using a processor fast enough to reveal these patterns. Counter-Strike 2 isn't the cyberpunk of slowing PCs down, it's just not as fast as CSGO was. And remember, while a faster graphics card will allow for better performance, a slower CPU will limit how fast it can get. And so at this point, I suggest you choose a level of performance that you're happy with, and to find a CPU that will allow you to reach that level. Because a fast CPU is a lot more affordable than a fast graphics card is, these days. Don't just go for the fastest of everything. That's foolish. That's what I've done. Don't do that, and you'll save a lot of money.
Bro, Chad, am I the only one that gets like, that's excited to buy a new PC, bro? I don't see it as like annoying work to figure out like what my build is gonna be. I remember when I built my PC, the current one that I still use, bro, I was checking forums on Reddit, I was using PC Part Picker, checking where to get the best deal, seeing if there's any bottleneck between GPU and CPU, making sure that the RAM has the right speed. I love it, bro! Oh my god, bro. Sheesh! W video as always, Mr. 3 Clicks always outdoing himself. Very, very nice. Yeah? Okay. What else do we have? But chat, isn't CSGO a more CPU heavy game? Like, did he mention which CPU he's using? It's nice to see 3 clicks and 2 clicks collaborating. I have a 1660 Ti, but on a laptop, which is less powerful than the desktop version, and can say I'm having a lot of FPS. But again, for CSGO, the processor, I think, is more important. Which CPU did he use? 1390K. Is that good? I don't know how powerful that is. Top of the line? Set to 8 P-cores. No HD for what I deemed highest performance. Lol. So it could be if you have like a pre-built from, from the era with the graphics card that he's talking about, that your CPU is may be a problem, no? Interesting. I mean, okay. Look at the NASA fucking CPU. Oh, jeepers. Okay, okay. Yeah. Maybe Ripper fierce, especially on volumetric smokes, of course, yeah? Aye. Okay, well, let's